Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily disagree with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Swami Purnananda said this about divine grace. Without divine grace, it's not possible to take refuge in God. So what is this divine grace? So tonight's subject is grace as flow. And we can imagine something like anything that flows, a river flows. But also, there is some area, a permitting area, something like a field, that contains within it such a generosity of variety, so many oscillations and waves within it with different frequencies, and all coming to us with different results. That is, delivering to us heat. Some waves deliver heat, some waves deliver sound, and other waves deliver different things, some all permitting area that has the capacity to be caught at some point. Let's take, for example, radio waves. In radio waves, we know that we don't have to have a number of different deliveries in broadcasting to our door. We know that every house can catch a radio broadcast, as long as the intention to tune a transistor into the broadcast, as long as we have the suitable equipment, we can tune into the waves because they are omnipresent. They are everywhere found. It's not that your individual broadcasts get sent to you as a DHL packet. So I've mentioned this a number of times because an approach like that deals with many, many different questions. If we were able to apply the same principle in our spiritual life, God's grace is always flowing. It's never stopping. And how is it then we don't catch it? And the primary reason is because it's something like the sun, which is always shining. But if a person closes a window or a door, he won't catch the light. So it is because of a person's own self-effort that is required. It's not because of evil, because of sin. It's not because of we have the impossibility of doing something or gaining the highest in perfection. So the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita is relevant in this case, and I mention it very frequently because it is of utmost significance and importance. This udarid atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayat atmaiva yatmano bandur atmaivu ripu atmana. Let a person raise himself by himself. So when Sri Ramakrishna says the wind of God's grace is ever flowing, you but have to set your sail, he's saying you have to raise it by yourself. Nobody will help you except, of course, there are other components available. So we were talking earlier about one component as guru, a teacher, or keeping holy company in the mind, or socially. Scripture, that is a kind of directional manual that tells you what to do in order to clean and purify the mind. And then there is prayer. We should always start every activity with prayer. What is prayer? Prayer is the capacity to align the mind to that which is adorable. There are many things that we might adore, but none of them last very long. And so Swami Purnananda continues with this. He says, without divine grace, it's not possible to take refuge in God. We take refuge in many, many different things. Because, of course, we have an optional choice how to engage in our behavior in this way or that way, not realizing that the obvious choice that we have is harmful to us. We think that it is a good thing. We wrongly evaluate it. And everybody is suffering. Today, there are more refugees in this world than ever. But here the expression is always in spiritual life, taking refuge in God. In other words, being a refugee, but not of a helpless type, but of a type that says, if I make a movement in a certain direction, then you will flow toward me in huge, huge, huge quantities. An infinite wave comes toward me with every movement and step toward thee. And he says, in order to feel this grace, not just to receive it, but to actually feel it, to feel its divinity, to feel its nurturing aspect, to feel its bliss, to feel its nectar. In order to feel this grace, one must associate with holy people, read sacred books, and pray earnestly. Earnestly is not rote prayer. It's not structured prayer necessarily. It has to be prayer from the heart. Even the structured prayer could be constructed from the heart. So many people rattle off many prayers of different kinds. Here we're living in a Roman Catholic country, so it's quite obvious that some people, in order to get something, will rattle off, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And if you ask, what did you say? Please say that again. I can forgive you, because in repeating it, not even I understood it. But if you take that simple prayer, when Jesus said that that was a prayer, when he teach us how to pray, that's the prayer he came up with. What's the significance? It's a simple prayer. It's a prayer of simple love. And we can say our Father, but we can say our Mother also. We can say some entity, some parent that we can rely on, take refuge in, that belongs to us. It is our own. Make that your very own. That very one is your very own. Who art where? The kingdom of heaven is within. Who art here within you. And your name is very holy. And Vedanta, Sikhism, Jainism, Buddhism, register a particular holy name called Om. And Om has a deep significance because it indicates the sum totality of existence and whatever is beyond there. So that very name is holy, and any other noble thought and high value we give, or term of endearment we give, will certainly be holy. And the kingdom is within you, thy kingdom come. And also thy will be done. In other words, may I align my mind, my obstinate will, may I align it to your divine will. May my small mind be subdued and enter into your cosmic intentions, your cosmic mind. And please give us this day, supply our daily needs, no doubt. And forgive us our trespasses, that is, whatever faults we have, we surrender to you. As we forgive, we can easily forgive, but not so easily forget. But forgetting is also forgiving. Forgetting really is forgiving. Lead us not into temptation. That is, don't deceive us, please, we beg you, by your Maya. That is, by that screen in front of us that prevents us from seeing you in reality, because only you can lift it for us. So even a small prayer like this that can be repeated mindlessly because of its familiarity, when we draw it back, when we enter into it with a certain sense of mindfulness, contemplation, understand its interior value, then it becomes an earnest prayer. And then he goes on to say, pray to the Lord with a yearning heart. How can we describe a yearning heart? Well, we already know it. There's nothing that moves the heart so much than a child sobbing from the heart. You know, that deep crying, you know, that where the whole body heaves a sigh of sadness, you know. So we have the experience of some internal shift, that movement, a yearning heart. But yearning heart directed in a specific way, having a yearning heart, Lord, please reveal yourself. I cannot live without you. You are the one who sustains everything. And tell him freely that you desire him alone. That's a tough one for most people. If you say, supposing you are to only dedicate all your feelings, all your energy, only to one entity, then you will have a review. That means I have to give up this, I have to give up that, I have to give up the other thing. Am I prepared to do it? So now we have to admit, if we are not able to do that, then at least we pray for a divine grace which overwhelms us, which is much bigger than our small efforts. Since I cannot do it, I'm appealing to you, please do it for me. Please grant me that yearning heart, should be a prayer. Tell him freely that you desire him alone. Do not doubt that he exists. I once told a Christian, I said, you say you're so adamant against atheists and you're so adamant that you're a theist, but you really are an atheist at times. Are we not all atheists from moment to moment, from time to time? Because if we truly had a belief that the divine was in us, through us, as us, beyond us, our dearest and nearest companion to the tips of the fingers and all of this, then we would not deviate from that in one way. In any way, we would not deviate from it. There would be no such thing as forgetfulness, otherwise called evil or sin. What is that sin? It's basically not having or removing, if you like, the opportunity for a deep realization now. That's all. Tell him freely that you desire him alone. You would do that with human love too, isn't it? Do not doubt that he exists. Do not doubt that he exists for a moment. You see, if you think that the world exists, and you draw a circle around that and you make that your world, then God becomes very small. You increase God, the size of the world becomes small, commensurate with it. Those who are meek and lowly are soon blessed with his vision. That is, those who do not posture in an egocentric way. If you approach him with devotion, he will surely reveal himself. Do not feel shy because you have made mistakes or have not called on him for a long time. Don't think, oh, I can't do it now because I haven't done it there. No, now's the time you should do it. If you lapse, then now's the time to do it and pick it up. This second won't wait for you. That is why let a man raise himself up by himself. Let him not drag himself down. For he himself is his own best friend. He himself is his worst enemy. There's nobody else. And then to him who has conquered the body or the association with the body and the senses, by that internal self, his own self is his friend. But to him who has not conquered itself, then his own self acts as his own enemy. But it requires some direction, some self-discipline. The self-disciplined and serene man remains steadfast in the Supreme Self, in cold, in heat, regardless of the conditions, in pleasure, pain, as well as honor and dishonor. This was from the 6th chapter, Bhagavad-Gita, but the 5th chapter also tells us some profound things. We can pick up a passage here. The embodied soul who has subdued his senses, having mentally renounced all actions. You think renunciation is going off into a monastery or a cave? No. Somebody who has renounced means they mentally renounced the ownership of all actions and rests happily in city of 9 gates. Katha Upanishad gives us 11. Neither acting nor causing others to act. There's a beautiful statement. When you say, I cannot do this, or I'm not worthy, or I'm a sinner, you're forgetting this one principle. You're not doing anything. Some entity is within you, and by its presence, all the other things move and react. The human body is just a mechanism. It is driven by a kind of remote control. You have some example for that? Yes. Look how many things in outer space are controlled from the Earth. See, there's a robot walking around Mars, controlled entirely from the Earth. In this same way, there's a remote action that is happening, and erroneously we register it to, I am doing this. It is my body, it is my mind, etc. No, it doesn't belong to you at all. It belongs to an entity that sits within you and is rules from within. Some majestic entity that, because of its majestic and divine presence, allows all the internal functions to occur. Swami Purnananda continues beautifully. He is the very embodiment of compassion. He does not care about your faults. You think the sun cares if you blow the entire world up? He doesn't care, continues to shine. Go to him with the simplicity of a child, and he will receive you. This idea of, I'm offending God, what is sin? Offending God. God can be offended? I don't want that kind of God. That kind of God is a human God. God can give offense and take offense? No, thank you. No, beams regardless. Surrender yourself wholeheartedly to God. Take refuge in him. Pray constantly with a pure, sincere heart. Oh Lord, I do not know what is good and what is bad. For me, I'm entirely dependent on you. Grant me what I most need for the spiritual life. Take me along the path which leads me to the greatest good. Give me the faith and strength constantly to remember you and meditate on you. What a beautiful prayer he gives. Supposing we're able to do that on a daily basis, on a regular basis, how beautiful that relationship would be. And then he goes on, we judge men by their actions, but God looks into their innermost minds. Be sure of this. God runs to him who prays with a sincere heart. Whatever you do, whether you are sitting or lying down or eating or working, pray constantly. O Lord, make me able to understand and receive that grace, which I know you are ready to give me. Lose yourself in prayer and meditation. Otherwise, how can the door to spiritual truth be opened? There comes a time when the spiritually advanced man wants to devote himself solely to meditation and prayer, but when that time comes, work drops away from him of itself. Yeah, some people think, may I join the monastery, may I join you in spiritual life, with the idea, let me do nothing except pray and meditate, whole day, day and night. But they're not ready for it, because their mind is pulling them outside all the time. They'll get bored with it. in a prison, you have 4 walls, you have a basic basin and a bed. In most Western prisons of a high caliber. Now they decided that every cell must have a television also, because it's unbearable. And if you're suffering from boredom, then you may destroy the very bed that you want to sleep on. You may become a nuisance. So they give a television to divert the mind. Supposing you say to a spiritual person ready for it, who's saturated in the prayer life and the meditative life, who is so deeply attuned with the divine, then he'll say, please give me 4 walls. Can we give you a television? No, thank you. Please don't connect me with the external world at all. Don't give me all the news of what's going on here and there. Of course, I don't think they give them Sky Sports or anything like that. Nothing elaborate, but just something to keep them ticking over, something that is more healthy for their mind, because there's a rehabilitative aspect to the prison as well. But a spiritual person won't take the prison. They will voluntarily go into a cave and meditate. I remember, not far outside Dehradun, there was a small cave where Swami Purnananda would have sat and done his tapasya. A small cave-like thing with a tiny entrance, sitting there. All he did was japa, meditation, and prayer. Wonderful. But if you want to take that as a model, the other side has to be dealt with. You can't be somebody who sits there and says, what a hell this is. So there's a spontaneous thing about it. And so when that time comes, says Swami Brahmananda, work drops away from him of itself. You don't have to do anything about it. However, this happens only when the mind is spiritually awakened. May I join your monastery to pray the whole day and night and meditate? Yes, certainly, when you're spiritually awakened. Until that time, it's not like that. So this is a wonderful text on grace. So let us discuss a little bit more using the Bhagavad-Gita and using this idea of this 9-gated city. The great example of this is to do really with what is called an internal instrument, antakarana. We can imagine it like a kind of probe that has the capacity to raise us up or lower us, and is directed, we can imagine, by an entity that sits there as a kind of ruler internally, ruling this antakarana, this internal instrument, what some people call mind. It has a particular feature, peculiar feature. It has the capacity to roam around. It has the capacity to be directed. Is there some example for that? Yes. The people who design cars, they know that if you have 4 pistons, you can't run them all in the same way. There has to be some kind of sequence. Let us say 4 pistons, so 1 fires, then number 4 fires, then 2, then 3. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4. And what makes them fire is because there's a sensitive arm in what's called a distributor that is able to catch the spark and fire the piston. So the mind has something like that, something like an internal probe that has the capacity to light on one thing and not another because there's a time sequence involved. If there wasn't that time sequence, then with all the capacity to know everything around us, with everything in place, eyes in place, ears in place, the capacity to absorb information, the capacity to make decisions, the capacity to react. If all of it happens in one go, it'll be a disaster. Fortunately for us, there's a sequence. You can deal with one thing at a time. When I see something, I can't, even though the ears are open, I can't simultaneously see and hear with equality, with equal value. As soon as I look at something, then the hearing fades away. As soon as I shift my attention to what is being heard, what is being seen fades away in the background. It is fortunate for us that we have this faculty to be able to raise ourselves up or lower ourselves by steering our attention within this internal instrument as we want. And with that, we can raise the mind up. And Swami Purnananda has indicated very, very well how we can do this in a devotional way, how we can tap into this divine grace as a flow. So let us take up more from the Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 5. We can pick up the 24th stanza, or even the 22nd here. The enjoyments that are born through the contact with the sense objects are truly the sources of misery. Consciousness that is our birthright is flowing through the sense organs. It's the objects that are giving us misery. They have a beginning and end, but the wise, they don't seek pleasure in these things externally. Then what do? He is able to withstand the impulse of all these negative things, lust and anger, even here before he leaves this body. That is a truly happy man. That happiness is there when we're able to withstand the impulses that are moving toward the outside. Then he was happy, whose happiness is within, who rejoices within, whose light is all within. That alone becomes that one without a second, that single entity that we call Brahman. The Mundaka Upanishad has a very beautiful passage in it. It says, Purusha evaram vishvam karma tapo brahma paramratam. The person himself, one single entity, the person himself is all of this. There's no second. Our error is we think there is all kinds of things within the framework of space and time, all fractured and diverted and all divided up. But here it's saying there's only one person. How is it that we make a mistake to see all this dividedness? So the person himself is all this work, austerity, and also the cosmic mind, the creator, beyond death, he who knows that, which is set in the secret place of the heart. In other words, when we take the whole of existence that we register as the cosmos, it is only one single entity, one single person. So that the same thing that applies on an individual basis, that there is a ruler of a city within, the same thing applies to the entire cosmos. Only one entity is there. That means, therefore, that what we call the body is divine grace. What we call the mind or the internal instrument is divine grace. What we call the air that is seemingly supplied to us, an individual, is this divine grace. We don't have to look for it, it's already there. What we call thought and thinking is divine grace flowing. We can't sit down, Lord, give me the grace. The divine grace is all flowing, it's already there. So that when we pray in a devotional way, as Swami Purnananda suggests, we are bear in mind that we have no doubt that we'll be the recipient of this grace. Because it's already there, it's already standing there, and all we're doing is tuning our attention in by yearning, by praying, by studying, by meditating. All of this are ways of tuning in to a certain all-permitting area that in physics is called the electromagnetic field, or we call it Akasha, or we can call it cosmic mind, tuning into that same broadcast so that the grace, the broadcast of divine grace is received by us at our door. It's not that it comes from afar. It is already there. It just requires our tuning our attention into it. The skill of doing that. So with all of these deleterious things destroyed, and doubts all dispelled, senses controlled, devoted to the welfare of all beings, spontaneously, because we find this unity of existence everywhere. The great sages, they attain absorption of this one entity without a second. So we can only capable of dealing with 1 point per second. Just like a sensitive arm in a car, dealing with 1 point per second. Fortunately, we can only deal with 1 point per second. That's to our advantage. It is to catch this attention and steer it in a chosen way. Whether it's picking up knowledge, whether it's expressing existing knowledge, our attention is so arranged that we have this capacity of only 1 point per second. The point of attention being there, what guides attention? It's the urge within us for perfection. There is something within not only us, but the whole of what we call life, the whole of the universe, is driving itself toward its own origin. We come from that, we're traveling with that, and expressed in that way, expressed through that, and arriving at that eventually. It is this urge towards perfection that is driving us forward. This internal instrument, this antarakarana, is necessary as an instrument with this finger pointing at it, this attention acting as a regulating point. It's there. And because attention is there, it can also be withdrawn. And if we withdraw it, nothing will light up. The minute we insert it, we get a revelation. The key is the point called attention. This kind of limb that we can project. So all scriptures are addressed not to God, please do this, please do that, to create a favorable world. The world is a mess, please change it. No, it's a series of do's and don'ts, knowing that we can, at least just for one moment, take our attention and steer it in a different direction. And one person did it for 3 days. That's a reference to an earlier conversation. Somebody here told me there was an experiment using 15 people, and they said, we'll take away all your media, take away telephones, mobiles, computers, all of that, and see if you can go for the Guinness Book of Records to see how many hours you can survive, or how many days. And the record was 3 days. Nobody else could survive beyond that. Imagine. So reliant are we in not only the senses, but the technological extension of that in dealing with the world and getting information. There's no doubt we live in an information age, and we've now become dependent on it. The wise people say, let me stop that. Let me now look internally. Let me take this faculty of attention and draw it in. And the scriptural injunctions will tell us, we are sure you can do this for a few seconds. And when you practice doing it for a few seconds, then you can do it for a few minutes. And once you've practiced for a few minutes, then you can do it for a few hours. Sustaining it is the difficulty. And we can't say that there is any fate in it. We ourselves are doing it. So there's a tendency to say, oh, it is all causally related. It's a deterministic universe. We have no free will. All right? Well, there's an example. Once a teacher asked a student who was arguing from this standpoint, he said, okay, I want you to do something. In a few words at random, please kindly repeat these words to me. And now please repeat the numbers that are there, and all the letters of the alphabet, and familiar quotations from Shakespeare. And he does all this, and he says, what became of your deterministic universe? No, you told me to do this. Yes, you could have said no. So you didn't exercise your free will in it. You're not a machine destined to work only in a certain way. How did you move from the machine, the rote, and get out of that habit? Till the person blinked, of course, for a short time. Because anybody can stop the repetitive impulse called what we call fate. So this introspection can be cultivated. The only question left then is whether we can choose a thought or an idea and put it in for an hour or two instead of a second. Now we can do that. Anything that catches our attention in an entertaining way, we get captivated by it, we get sucked into it. I'm never tired of giving you an example of somebody who said he went to a concert, and when asked how long did he stay there, he said 4 hours. In other words, he was so entertained with the senses that his internal attention was captivated. Something that is internal, that is much beautiful, more beautiful than that, much more exhilarating than that, much more magnetic than that, something that is like nectar. We'll find we can't do without it. So, this means that properly cultivated attention is one's friend, not one's enemy. Then we mentioned renouncing all activities is what we have to do. And that there was a city, says the 5th chapter, in this case of 9 gates. And similarly, in nature, there's a consciousness, or there is a mechanism called consciousness. And that gets activated by the presence of the Lord. So there's no such thing as, I own this body. If I own this body, then I'll be conducting all the activities myself, and I'm not. And if I don't own the body, but God owns the body, then I'm completely dependent on His grace, which is even now present. When the proper conditions are fulfilled, a person can realize the highest truth here and now, because God is sitting here already. It's not coming from the outside. But when we take our attention and catch it, then this grace reveals itself to us. It is something like a flowing aspect, a flowing entity. Supposing there is a river, and we all want to bathe in the river, and we want to do it by facing the oncoming current. That's a little risky. If we show our back to the current, then we might get toppled over. And so the best way will be to go lunging forward into it, into the oncoming stream, like a kind of like a crocodile. You put your face and arms straight into the current that's coming and dip yourself. By the time you come up, you're erect. So the river would have pushed you into an erect position. Supposing a person does that 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 times, making sure that the head and back, the whole body is submerged, lifting the forehead at the right moment in time. He doesn't lose his balance, nothing like that. When he does that many times, would he not be able to know water is cold? Would he not be able to know that there's a current that flows that has a correcting attitude when handled correctly? When he watches the movement of his body to get submerged properly, hands and legs and everything being adjusted to suit the current. And he also registers through the skin that the current can be felt, that it's cold, that the notices the very temperature of it. He didn't have to have an initiation to understand it. He understood it already. So in that same thing, the same way, when a person does this movement of the rod of attention, holding it in even balance, preventing both extremes from pulling the attention here or there, he understands also automatically that it's the Lord's power that is controlling it, not him. So this grace is ever flowing. And we can think of it like a river, actually. We can think how a river, and earlier on I gave a meditation similar to that. We can think of anything that's flowing and see how flow is an easy thing. And we can see how this, what we call this divine grace, is not far off or distant, but is present here and now and available for us to tap into. And we've been given such beautiful example by Swami Purnananda about how to do it from a devotional standpoint. Evil is a way of thinking that removes the possibility of getting knowledge here and now. You can define it in this way. It's not that I'm incapable, it's not that I'm sinful, it's not that I'm weak. It's only that I missed the opportunity that was here and now. That's all. It went unrecognized. So any newcomer has a chance. Any new value has a chance to insert into the mental field. And what they will do is that stimulates the honey of grace that flows on the other side. And coming back to Sri Ramakrishna's statement there, the wind of God's grace is ever blowing. We but have to set our sail. But I'm never tired of saying it's not that easy to set the sail. But there has to be a willingness to start with. Imagine somebody wants to teach you sailing, and you say, oh, unfortunately, I'd love to, but I'm frightened of wind and I'm frightened of water. Other than that, I'm fine. Well, you can't do it on land. And then setting the sail. No, I don't know how to do that. I'm hopeless with knots, with ropes. I can't learn all these complicated styles of tying a rope, all these various nautical terms about how to tie knots and untie them and so on and so forth. Well, that's okay. Stay at home then. Nothing will happen. But if you want to be determined to do it, and why should you want to do it? Why particularly sail? Because in the analogy, the delight of allowing the wind to take you in a sailing boat, effortlessly. All you have to do is make sure the sail is facing the wind, that's all. You're not going in a straight line, it's a zigzag, tacking. You're just making sure, in an alert way, is my mind always attuned to the ever-blowing wind? And am I prepared to shift it as a kind of game or adventure? But do I know how to do it? Yes. All the prophets tell you, all the saints and seers tell you, all the scriptures are telling you exactly the same thing. Come on, take it up then. And see how you can catch that flow that is within you. What is the breath? That flow. What is thinking? That flow. What is the circulation of blood? That flow. What is digestion? The capacity to digest, that's a flow as well. What is the sun beaming, giving life? That's a flow. What is the water that enables the blood to flow itself and gives you life? That's a flow. What is a river? It wants to flow. You try and stop it, it'll find a way to flow. It'll continue flowing. And it'll want to get into the sea. What is the air? It flows. There's a great example, you see, of why we think that grace is symbolized by milk being produced by a cow, something that flows freely. We catch it. So all of this, the whole of this, what we call life, is a flow. The Upanishads phrase it like this: from Brahma to a clump of grass. That is from the cosmic mind. See how this Mundaka Upanishad tells us. There's this person. There's only one thing. So wherever we look, we can find a flow. Then what's in the way? Obstacles are in the way. Who made these obstacles? They're self-created. We ourselves made them. We have the capacity to raise ourselves, don't forget, by ourselves, or lower ourselves by ourselves. We are our own best friend, our own worst enemy. So obstacles are there so that we can find and discover a way around them. Not bash into them, not crash through them, but find a nice way around them. If a road has thorns, then put on tough shoes. If a road has potholes, drive in a four-wheel drive. All the equipment is with you. And the equipment itself is this divine grace. Now, why would we use continuously this concept of flow, flow, flow? It's because when we do tune into it, it becomes easy, it becomes natural. All the struggle is gone. We're not fighting against something. We're going with something. We're swimming with, we're not going against. We're taking the easy way around, which we thought was difficult. It's only the initial resolve that's difficult. It's only the adjustment of our thinking initially that's difficult. And this is all part of setting the sail. It's all part of raising the mast up. And it's not that we don't know, it's we don't want to know. Because there are instructors there. Come on, do this, do that, do the other, in the form of scripture, teacher, etc. But having done your minimum basic and setting the sail, no amount of huffing and puffing on the sail will make it move. Even on dry land, when you put the sail up, the wind wants to move it. The wind is much more powerful than you. And then gliding through the water, allowing the wind to take you. In this way, when we take refuge, in Swami Purnananda's language, when we take refuge in the divine and allow ourselves to be carried, we are taking advantage of the grace that is already present, because the indweller of the city is already here, is already now. I'm never tired of repeating that beautiful phrase from Joel Goldsmith. And he's doing it in the context of defining meditation. Meditation is a song of gratitude. Immediately we find a tuning mechanism for it. A song of gratitude that God is here, that God is now, that God is love. Imagine now you're going to apply that. Even as you sit here, even as you do all your daily activities, whatever they are. Because there are two ways of removing one of the biggest obstacles there are, egoism. That is a sense of ownership and doership within the body and mind. Instead of saying that, we can see this flow of grace that is flowing through every limb, through every hand, through every eye, through every ear, through every head, through every foot, through every blade of grass, through every movement of the air, through all the growth in trees and flowers, through every flap of a bird's wing. And there we see a flow of divine grace flowing through all of these things, enabling all of this. And how is it that we can remove egoism as a result? Is because it's included in this body. When we say it's flowing through all bodies, we're making no exceptions. So we have these hands, these arms, these eyes, and so on, no exceptions. The other way of doing it is to see and feel that divine presence in a personal way inside everybody and everything, particularly where it's most obvious. Most obvious means where it's most manifest as humans. That means that all humans, we cannot discriminate then. We cannot say, I can see God in this person, I can't see God in that person. Why? That person hasn't got the behavior that corresponds with the divine. No, you're only seeing the external thing. You're not seeing the internal dimension of it. You're not seeing this indweller of the city. You're not seeing there the Lord of the universe seated in the hearts of all, equally present everywhere. You're saying God is in this person, is not in that person, or it's in this thing, is not in that thing. It's in a beautiful pet, like a cat or a dog, but definitely not a crocodile. No, it's in both. But you made a discernment which wasn't accurate, because a crocodile has a function, and a dog has a function too. So the only thing that we are saying is the functions are different. The name and the form and the functions are different, that's all. And learning the art of doing that equally everywhere, seeing God within. And the reason why we say God is we're simply personalizing what is there in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, where this stanza quoted earlier occurs, and says, see me, that is Krishna, that is the Lord of the universe, personally, in everyone, in the heart of all, seeing all beings in the self and the self in all beings. In so many places, from the Upanishad onwards, we find this statement is present. So we have to take it seriously. Why would we see it? Just as a source or of imagination, just to exercise some kind of trick? No, not like that. We're doing it because it's the reality. Because without that entity, we have a hollow shell that doesn't move. Call it a corpse. The life-giving aspect to that is purely this divine grace that flows. Flows as speech, flows as thought, it flows as life. So with that, I'll finish off and say that, you see, these talks could be something like a meditation. These talks are not really there for information transfer. They're there to catch an idea and see, can you do something with it? Something useful. Can you go away from here so that your life is better this evening and tomorrow? That's the idea. And for the next day and the next week. And to get inspiration from everywhere you can and use it. Make it useful to you. And feel the corresponding difference in dealing with life. So that it has a practical dimension to it. That it says that if life is difficult, if life is awkward, if life is painful, is there a different way of looking at things? And when we do that, what do we feel? Whatever we feel is called this grace that flows. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.